Welcome back, America. So much conversation in the last few months at American dinner tables about the threat China poses, the China spy balloon, TikTok, among the two things that really prompted a very healthy conversation. Well, our next guest, he's been involved in trying to craft the solutions, the policy solutions to help America fight and win what is clearly now a Cold War. Joining us right now is Jeff Smith, the Director of Asian Studies Center at the Heritage Foundation. Jeff, great to have you on the show.
It's good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
This document is, everyone in Washington's been talking about this document. It's so important. The new Cold War, a plan for countering China. What was the inspiration behind this? And tell us about some of the collaborators on it.
Yeah, so this was a heritage-wide collaboration. So we brought in in-house scholars from across various disciplines, military experts, economics experts, legal experts, tech experts. You know, we really tapped the Heritage Foundation expertise in such a broad way that also, frankly, underscored the scope of the challenge. The fact that we needed to bring in all these different experts brought home how multifaceted the threat from China really is. And it wasn't just in-house. We also consulted with a wide range of coalition partners and conservative institutions and former administration officials, really from across the movement, to bring together a wide range of expertise to contribute to what's now over 100-page paper looking comprehensively at the threat from China.
Yeah, and I think people hear the word Cold War and they think, well, that was the Soviet Union, that was 50 years ago. The answer is no, we're in the midst of another one. How does this fit the definition of Cold War? What is the object of the war, and what does winning look like?
That's a great question. There are differences from our rivalry with the Soviet Union, and I think that's okay. Not all hot wars look the same, and there's no hard rule that says every Cold War has to be apples to apples comparison. And there are some important differences in the sense that China is more dangerous an adversary than the Soviet Union was, because they have far more economic capability and power than the Soviet Union ever did, which was a military powerhouse, but never an economic peer of the United States. But China also has the advantage that we have essentially opened up our society to China and our economy to China, following this, free trade engagement first enterprise for so many decades. We're now exposed to China in ways we never were to the Soviet Union. And so we have other vulnerabilities that we need to account for and correct for here in the United States that in some ways make this more dangerous than the last Cold War.
Yeah, that's such a great point. So many of the people I talked to in the intelligence community mentioned that, which is our effort to kind of perestroika, try to create a perestroika with China, actually opened up China. They took advantage of it, and they have so much more information about us than the Soviets ever did. On that front, you have all sorts of remarkable recommendations in this paper. What are some of the most important ones? What are the policy solutions that have the best chance of tipping the balance in favor of the United States in this competition with China?
A great question. We've got a lot. We've got over 100 policy recommendations in the executive summary alone. One that's been forefront of my mind lately: ban TikTok. We need to stop the bleeding. There's a CCP Trojan horse espionage app on the phone of, who knows, 100 million Americans. It's leaking information to the CCP every single day. I think we need to start and cut that off. We also make the case that we need to ban CCP lobbyists. They shouldn't be lobbying the federal government or state government officials. We're not allowed to lobby Chinese government officials in Beijing. We should not be allowing that here. Yeah. We should not be allowing the purchase of sensitive farmland near military installations. I mean, this is basic common sense stuff that any great power should be doing to protect its citizens and its economy and its state secrets. And we've simply been asleep at the wheel for too long.
Yeah, that's a great description, asleep at the wheel. I hear that a lot when you talk to people in the intelligence community or in the military that really understand that threat. One of the places that I think I've read this report a couple of times, and I had some great conversations with ambassadors and John Bolton and others about it. The insinuation of China into our supply chain, whether it's on batteries in the clean energy front or food on that, or medical and medicine and pharmaceuticals, really significant strategy that China's executed for 20 years, pretty much uncountered until the last few months. How important is it for America to reclaim its supply chain and to create a sort of decoupling from the dependence that China wanted to create?
Incredibly important. And COVID-19 really brought that fact home to us and those vulnerabilities home to us when we realized how many of even our basic pharmaceutical products were reliant on supply chain originating in China, and that even in cases short of conflict with China, these supply chains could be disrupted by draconian policies in Beijing or retaliatory economic coercion measures. I mean, who knows what that would look like in an actual conflict situation. And so that's really woken us up. And the number of industries where China has essentially gained a stranglehold is remarkable and concerning and worrying. And this was, an element that we didn't really consider for so long because we were enamored with this idea that globalization has taken over. We're all free traders. Supply chains are global. And so there's no need to worry about these national security considerations. The era of great power competition is over. Well, frankly, that's not true. And we need to do a much better job of ensuring that the critical supply chains are either, and in the paper we encourage several efforts along this line, but one of the things is encouraging reshoring production back to the United States, nearshoring to destinations closer to the United States in the Western Hemisphere, and friendshoring to strategically aligned countries like India, where the risk of supply chain disruptions is much lower.
Yeah, such a great strategy. India and has a real interest, I think, in countering China as well. So they're a natural ally in this endeavor. Jeff, I want to ask a little bit about the need of China still for capitalization from America and obviously a marketplace here in America, really key to their economy. That gives us some leverage that, with the exception of a few things in the Trump administration, hasn't really been fully exercised by the United States. How important is it to use access to capital markets, use access to commercial markets to try to force China to change some of its behavior?
Well, I'm not too encouraged by the prospect of convincing China to change its behavior.
Yeah.
I'm not certain how effective that strategy will be. The Chinese are very determined and committed. And you do identify something important, though, which is that China does still value access to cheap capital in the US. And even more than that, they value access to Western technology.
Yeah.
And so we do still have a few cards to play. And I'm glad to finally see some serious efforts being made to restrict high-end technology exports to China and restrict some of the inbound investments they've been making in the United States. But it's essentially been a free-for-all Wild West for far too long. And one of the most important things we need to do in the next few years is reform our system of export controls, of screening inbound investments into the United States, and lastly, screening outbound investments, what U.S. money is going into China and what they're investing in. Because right now there's very little oversight on the billions of dollars that are flowing into China, in some cases investing in advanced AI companies and technology companies that feed the capabilities of the People's Liberation Army. We need to do a much better job both monitoring and restricting those investments that are against the national security interests of the United States.
The optics of the U.S. relationship with China have been really impacted by the Biden administration, whether it was the first summit in Alaska, where we kind of got dissed on our own territory, to letting the spy balloon traverse the entire United States before it was taken down, and that becoming sort of a wake-up moment for Americans. Has the sort of perceived weakness of the Biden administration on China policy emboldened China to maybe take a shot at Taiwan? Is that a real threat in the next few years, that China might try to force a reunification with Taiwan?
I do think it's a real threat. And we know that Xi Jinping has ordered the PLA to be ready to seize Taiwan by 2027. There are other indications that China may believe its window for doing so is shrinking, and that it's sort of reached maximum relative power vis-a-vis the US and Taiwan. And so that's another dangerous scenario, is that if it believes that over time its window is shrinking, or it believes that the United States response will be inadequate, either because of weak leadership or the changing military balance of power, that might provoke China to make a move sooner than it even planned to. And so absolutely it's a risk. Is it more than 50%? No. But even if it's 5% or 10%, the results would be so catastrophic that we need to be prepared for this yesterday.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Jeff, you've done such amazing work with your colleagues at Heritage Foundation. What is the best way for people to get those 100 plus policy recommendations for winning the Cold War? I think everyone should read it.
Well, the good news is you don't have to read all 110 pages to get to the policy recommendations. We have an executive summary that's posted on the website. We also have a fairly easy to navigate webpage, so you can identify the table of contents and just what sections you're most interested in, whether it's protecting the U.S. economy, whether it's reorienting our defense postures to the Indo-Pacific, whether it's arming Taiwan or protecting from CCP apps in the United States. You can easily navigate to each of those sections on the Heritage website.
Yeah, I've had many people say to me since it came out, it's one of the most important pieces of thought leadership on China policy in a very long time. And congratulations to you and all your colleagues for making that available to the American public. It's an important piece of work. Great to have you on the show today, sir. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back after these messages.